Hello and welcome to Geometry Special Right Triangles. In this video we are going to solve problems using the properties of 45-45-90 and 30-60-90 triangles. Here are some of the standards that we're going to hit in this video, and these are from the Florida's Best Standards for Mathematics. So let's go ahead and get started. So with a 45-45-90 triangle, let's kind of think about why this rule kind of applies. So for a 45-45-90, we know that it's going to be an isosceles triangle, right? And so if I were to set this at 1 and this one at 1, then when I do my Pythagorean theorem, I have 1 squared plus 1 squared equals, and then this side squared, right? And so this just turns out to be 1 plus 1 equals c squared. And then when I go to take my square root, c ends up being the square root of 2. And it's also the same as saying 1 times the square root of 2. And so in this case, this is where we get where if I have an x and an x here, then it's going to be x times the square root of 2. And so that kind of just gives us the basis for our rule here. For 30, 60, 90 triangles, there's a pattern that happens with these. When I have something like a 1 here and a 2 as my hypotenuse, I end up getting a squared plus 1 squared equals 2 squared, and then a squared plus 1 equals 4, a squared equals 3, and then when I take that square root of both sides, I get a is equal to the square root of 3. And so with this being the square root of 3, that's the same as saying 1 times that square root of 3. And so for this one, we have x, and then 2 times x, and then we get x times the square root of 3. Now, thankfully, we don't have to remember that. On our EOC, we do have special right triangles on our reference sheet. And so this is pulled right off of our reference sheet. And so we really just have to know how to use it. And so let's take a look at this first one. So with this first one, they're telling us that this is a 45-45-90 triangle. If this one is 45, then this one is also 45. So I get 7 and 7, and then I'm using my my pattern here, and so this is going to be 7 times the square root of 2. And don't let those x's throw you off just because they are using x's on the reference sheet. So just be careful. All right, same thing with this one. With this one, I know that this leg is going to be the same as this leg. So this side is going to be 3 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. And then you may want to brush up on your radicals, but the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is just 2. And so that's going to be 3 times 2, which is going to give me 6. And if you're not sure, just go ahead and use your calculator. So let's clear this out. We have 2 square root times 2 square root, and it gives us 2. And so you can kind of lean on your calculator, but you will want to brush up on radicals, especially when you're preparing for your EOC. All right, let's do the same thing for this one. Same thing for this one. We've got 44 times the square root of 2. So this one is going to be 44 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. and that's going to give us 44 times 2, which gives us 88. Okay, all right. Now for this one, same thing. And so you're just following that pattern, and notice that you're basically just doubling that number out in the front. And then let's say we have the square root of 2 and the square root of 2. So this would be the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, and that's just going to be 2. And if we thought about this being the number out in front, it's just double this number that's out in front. And so you can kind of remind yourself of that pattern there to make it easier, and you won't even have to worry about radicals for these types of triangles. So now let's get into the 30, 60, 90 triangles. And so you kind of always want to just keep in mind what your short leg is. And your short leg is also going to be across from that 30-degree angle. And so your short leg is really like the base one, okay? And so you always want to kind of find your short leg and just kind of keep that in mind. We'll look at this big one in a second, but let's kind of think about our base here. And so if this short side is our base and that's x, then it's going to be, notice that our short leg is going to be what's out in front of that square root of 3. And so that means this has to be 8. And then from here, it's going to be 8 times 2, which gives us 16. Okay. Looking at this one, we're thinking about our short leg, and remember, it's half of this one. And so this is going to be 7.5. And then we're going to use that short leg, and that is going to be 7.5 times the square root of 3. So you're always just going back to that original design, and you have that on your reference sheet. So don't let these kind of intimidate you or anything like that, especially when you're seeing radicals. Use your reference sheet. All right, for this one, we've got our short leg, and so our hypotenuse is going to be twice the size, and so that's going to be 48. And then our longer leg is just our shorter leg times the square root of 3. And now let's take a look at this one and kind of try to find some starting points with this one. So with this one, we have kind of 3 triangles going on here. So I've got two 30, 60, 90 triangles put together, creating a right triangle. All right, so let's start with the information they gave me. So the first thing they give us is this 2 times the square root of 3. And so from here, if I'm a little intimidated by starting with this triangle here, okay, when I'm looking at 2 times the square root of 3, I know that that is the hypotenuse of this triangle, and my shorter leg is going to be half of that. And so if that is a little too scary for you, we can start with a different triangle. So don't fret, okay? I also know that this is across from my 60-degree angle. And so when I'm looking here, I know that this leg here is going to be 2, because I know that this has to be 2, and then my longer leg is that number times this square root of 3. So I can start with this 2 here if that makes me a little bit feel a little bit better. And then from here, if this is the hypotenuse of this triangle here, I know that y has to be 1, and then this is going to be 1 times the square root of 3. So that goes back to my original idea, right? That this has to be half of this one here. And all we have to do is divide by 2, and so 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so 1 times that square root of 3. And then that makes finding x a little bit easier, right? So now I can look and focus on this one, where this one is now my shorter leg. I multiplied by 2 to get my hypotenuse, and then I'm going to take this one and multiply it by the square root of 3. Well, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is just 3. And so for this one, it's going to be 1 times 3, and that's just going to give me 3 for that side. So x is 3. And then y is 1. And then, of course, if they gave us letters, just make sure that you're really paying attention. When you take your EOC, are they asking me for AD? Are they asking me for DC? Or are they asking me for AC, where I would say 4? So just kind of keep that in mind. And this is our last example for special right triangles.